Good evening. It is Monday night and March the 2nd, 2026. Time sure is fun when you're having flies. Yes, it is. And I had this weird realization today as I had a networking session that I have to go to every Monday afternoon at Long Beach City College for my um, ASU online program. It's called ASU Local. That is part of my educational programming that I do, and it's actually pretty darn cool because I got to run into one of my younger friends named Benny that I met at the gym a couple of years ago. Ran into him, met him sitting in the sauna, all 185 degrees of existence while sitting in a sauna. And, I shared with him today, with one of his friends, how we had met and the reason why we met, and how, initially when I was sitting in there like probably two or three times where I would be sitting in there. It's nice and quiet, relaxing, very meditative. And then in would come this young kid, probably not much older than my daughter, who is now 20 years old. And he'd come in and he'd be like kind of dancing around and, just kind of freestyling, singing, and just kind of like, me being 50 some years old, because who is this young kid being I was being a grumpy old man. And then I realized after like the second or third time that I caught myself being bothered by this younger person and his behaviors, that he wasn't the problem, I was. And so I thought, well, let me try something different. Let me introduce myself to him and see what happens if I get to know him. And so he was watching a video on his phone, and it was something I recognized. I don't remember what it was now. But we started talking, and then over time we kept running into each other at the gym, and we would talk more and more and more until we became friends. And then one day, a couple of years ago, I ran into him at Long Beach City College. And all of a sudden I realized, boy, we're students together. How funny is that? And so, I think a lot of times, like in this instance, I was somehow allowing him and his, I don't want to say behavior, that sounds condescending, but what he was doing, I was giving it excess rental space in my head. And it took me a few times of being bothered before I was able to sit back and realize that he was just being a young adult doing what young adults do. And it was me that was being the grumpy ass old man that needed to have an attitude adjustment, if you will. And I'm very glad I did, because now I have a friend, a younger friend, that I get to talk to. And, like today, I was at school and I was leaving, and everything had to happen exactly with the way that it did, so that as I was walking down this one walkway at Long Beach City College, all of a sudden, walking in front of me was Benny, my favorite uh, my favorite guy on Instagram. He's got an Instagram account that he makes little video shorts on there, and I got to meet one of his friends, and it was so cool getting to sit there and just kick back and talk with him, and the world just felt like so much of a better place today, and I really love getting to run into him. And that's the cool part about the world we live in. We I don't think we do well to be outside of human contact. We need to be out running into people, waving, saying hello, shaking hands, greeting, giving hugs. Just say hi, ask questions, listen. For God's sakes, we have two ears and one mouth. The ratio should explain it all. And I even got to experience that today with one of the girls in my class, Alicia. And she was sharing with me why she had to take like 8 classes this semester, which is absolutely insane. And it was because her employer wanted her to get through and graduate with all the units necessary so that she could move on from being a teacher's aide up to being a teacher full time in the Bellflower Unified School District. And I also want to touch on that in a minute, but I find that a lot of times it's very easy to want to just talk and be heard. And I'm very fortunate because being able to come on here and be that guy talking to you, for anybody that would be out there listening to this or watching this, at least in some sense, satisfies that need for me. And so when I get a chance to get out in the world and actually run into people I know, guess what? It's more fun for me to ask them about their life and what they're doing and get to hear what they have to say. And people love to talk about themselves. Look at me, look what I'm doing here. I'm doing exactly what I say everybody loves to do. It's just the way it works. Um, Anyways, that was my afternoon. Got to go in and have a couple of small pieces of pizza at school. Another way that I avoid taking myself too seriously with my dietary intake is if somebody's going to be kind enough to buy some food for me, even if it doesn't fit my dietary um, self prescription, I will eat some. I'm not going to take any home with me. They're always trying to tell me, oh, Mike, take some home with you, take some leftovers. I'll eat it here, but I ain't taking that home and putting it in my refrigerator. No. Anyways, enough said about that. I, I was doing a lot of listening today about AI and education and the future of AI technologies, whether it be ChatGPT or one of these large language models or other things other than just the simple new version of Google, if you will, the way people are using ChatGPT. We're probably using that form of AI, the large language models, in a pretty rudimentary way, when there are probably a lot better ways that it can be used that are more beneficial to us. And I look at education, and education sits right at the center of, I think, this shift that's happening with AI. And rather than policing students for using AI, or restricting its use, or telling students, if we find that you used this, you're going to get a 0 for this assignment. You might even be expelled from the school and not be allowed to come back. That they need to ask, how do we train students to collaborate with it ethically, skillfully, and creatively? Because the reality is, if schools are trying to prepare students for a world that we have in front of us, but they're expecting us not to use the tools that our future employers are going to be expecting us and making decisions about hiring us based on our fluency with the use of these tools, then what's the point? What's the point? The literate professional of the future will know how to prompt, refine, verify, and integrate machine intelligence into human judgment. And if the classroom bans AI, then students who are trying to prepare for a world where AI is going to be fully expected is patently programmatically problematic. Say that fast. The classroom that bans AI risks preparing students for a world that no longer exists. And so, in that sense, I think universities just need to get over it and figure out better ways to assign classwork or schoolwork that better incorporates the use of artificial intelligence in such a way that we are being prepared for the future that is in front of us. And which leads me to my next question. Are we missing the mark on what longevity really is? Is it simply living to be 120 years? Is it feeling young even though we keep looking older? I mean, trust me, I don't want to look any older than I am now, ever. And I'd like to go back so that my body physically looks younger. But the question is, what really is longevity? Is it, and for me, the way I would define it is being able to live to 120 years of age without the assistance of crutches, wheelchairs, walkers, no hip joint, knee, ankle replacements, shoulder replacements, anything like that. Somebody just drove by and honked a real weird sounding horn, and it kind of gave me the heebie-jeebies. So for that for me is longevity. I want to maintain a body that is young and healthy, and I am working on that with my vitamin C supplementation right now, because I imagine a lot of what we call aging is something where we currently have a failure to understand what it is biochemically that is keeping our body from being able to run us all the way up to 120 years of age with a body that doesn't have age spots, with a body that has an appropriate layer of fat beneath the skin so that we look young. And if anybody out there knows any secrets other than taking pills or surgeries, please, by all means, contact me. I mean, leave some messages down below, and I'm sure there's some way you can figure out to get in touch with me. You can find me on Facebook, add me as a friend, we can chat. Just look me up. I'll put my Facebook page link in the notes section here. And that's how you can get a hold of me. And gosh, I was going to say same thing on Instagram, but Instagram's Facebook anyways. But also, on to my next point, we think of AI or large language models as something more human than it is because their output uses words just like we do. When in reality they're little different than a forklift or a hammer or a chainsaw. They're just tools. And in reality, things like Grok or ChatGPT or Google Gemini, Microsoft Copilot, these things are closer to a spreadsheet, a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet and its functionality. But even there, most people, I don't want to say most people, but a lot of people don't fully appreciate or utilize the Microsoft spreadsheet software to its fullest capabilities. It has some amazing scientific calculator, graphing calculator functionality about it that if you know how to use it, you are leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of people. I don't think there's any good reason why we shouldn't be able to know how to use it. And honestly, I barely know how to use it. And I either better get used to knowing how to use it and take some classes on it or teach myself how to use it. Because if I do ever end up working for somebody, chances are they're going to want somebody that at least knows how to use it. Because it's one thing to know how to use Microsoft Word, it's a completely different thing using Microsoft Excel spreadsheets. Like I said, you can do some pretty crazy shit if you know how to use Microsoft Excel. And fortunately for me, maybe I can talk my ex-brother-in-law who runs Excel University and give me some free classes. Anyways, the AI, and this is probably going to be the last point I talk about tonight because I'm not wanting to spend too much time here. I got 2 weeks off of school, and I've got plenty of time to come on here and talk to you guys for the next 2 weeks, whoever that might be that ends up listening to this. But AI in the form of the large language models that we have today, they're probably not going to be the end point. We're probably at just the beginning of the curve, and the way we're looking at them now is probably a lot like the way people were looking at the internet and the use of .com and the creation of websites somewhere back in the mid to late 1990s, which is so extremely different than what it is now. And the question is, there have been a lot of technologies and a lot of wealth generated out of those technologies as they existed at that time because of things like the creation of the internet. And we can also see, going back in time to like the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, electricity did not exist at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That didn't come till many years later. And yet there were a lot of industries that were being run by things like, and they had to create plants, manufacturing plants right next to a river so that they could use the water that was running down the river to turn big wheels water wheels that would in turn spin a great big, uh, literally a log that was running inside the mill that would then have bands that would be spinning off of that mill, that they would have gears to change the speeds, and then they would have tools that were being powered, like bladed tools that were being spun and powered by the generation of the water or steam, for example, and steam engines. But then along comes electricity being produced, whether it was alternating current or battery power. And, you have people like Tesla saying, here, let's just change out this water wheel for electricity in this motor. Well, why would I want to do that? This already works for me. I don't want to go and have to change out all this equipment in my factory that's running perfectly just fine the way it is and has been for many years. And then that's where new factories being built said, okay, we can do this differently. We can build a factory somewhere that's cheaper, has cheaper real estate, because it's not having to be parked right up against this river where everybody else wants to be, because it's prime real estate so that you can use a water wheel to turn your machines. Well, now I can build that same factory over there in the middle of that field on the other side of that hill where the real estate is only 1/10 the price. So already now I have saved a whole lot of money on real estate. Now we can take this electricity that's being created and generated, and here's this electric motor that does the same thing. But now I don't have to have one humongous wheel in the water powering all these different things. I can have all these electric motors of different sizes on all these different tools all throughout the factory. Yeah, and all of a sudden, the cost of manufacturing goods went down significantly, and the new factories that were able to incorporate the newer technologies that the older factories weren't able to or weren't willing to adapt to, well, now the new factory is making a whole lot more profit because it can do the same thing for a whole lot less money. And I think that's where we're sitting at. We're sitting at a point in time like that, or at the beginning of the internet with the whole .com bubble. And now that this intelligence factor has been layered on top of what, let's call it Web 3.0 or whatever, what are the new technologies that are going to be able to be given birth to because of this? That's where you want to find yourself. If you want to be as wealthy as Jeff Bezos is today, he wasn't that guy in 1997. He was back in the late 90s. He was just a guy that was well educated, had been successful in business, but he was somebody that had a vision, that was willing to take this new technology and not limit it to the use of, hey, let's make some websites with the word .com behind it, but let's recreate this whole idea behind an online marketplace. And there were other companies that were doing it before him. Does anybody out here remember a website called Newegg? If you wanted to buy electronics and books and stuff back then, you would go to newegg.com. And yet nobody remembers them today. Why? Because Jeff Bezos did it better. Think about things like Alta Vista, all these other search engines that existed early on, mama.com, Ask Jeeves. Do you remember Ask Jeeves? How about dogpile.com? Nope, because Google did it better. And that's kind of where we're at. We're at a time where, it may very well be that even Amazon.com is going to be that old factory that's tied to the river, that its technologies are being run by the old water wheel. Is that the case? Could that be the case? I really, honestly, I don't know. Uh, Amazon has tributaries going off into so many different damn things that I don't foresee it going anywhere anytime soon. But I imagine that there are a lot of other things that we're just scratching the surface to understand what possibilities lay before us as a result of the growth of artificial general intelligence. And that's one of the things that I'm really, I do waste some clock cycles up here thinking about that stuff, because I really want to get ahead of the technological curve. Not because I want to be able to make a whole lot of $1 bills, dollar bill, y'all. No, I don't see that in our future. I think we're moving very swiftly towards a time of sufficiency of all needs being met because of technology. And I look forward to it. But my thought on that is get to it, rip the band-aid off, call it universal basic income if you want. The idea behind it is one that I actually read by a friend of mine today. Called he wrote an article about, or an essay about 10 years ago, called Free Future. And this idea of currency, I mean, it's that whole idea of taking your time and trading your time and your efforts and your skills for pieces of paper, are there have always been a certain amount of hours per day that we as humans have had to trade for basic things like food, shelter, clothing. Okay. And today that would also include basic medical care, and costs associated with retirement. And yet, if you look at least from an anthropological perspective, how much time did people ever spend in the past? If you spread it all out over an annual, yearly basis, people probably worked easily 2, 3, 4 hours a day to cover their basic needs. Yet somehow we've now stretched that into 8, 9, 10 hours a day, and then on top of that, the commuting back and forth to our jobs. And so instead of doing the fishing or the working in the field or the raising of chickens and making of eggs and milking of cows, we pay industries to do that for us. We go somewhere else and we earn money based on whatever skill. We take that money, then we buy those goods so we don't have to do that dirty work. And I don't foresee in the future that we're going to have to do that, go back to doing that dirty work. The question is, I guess ultimately, what is that transition going to look like so that each person in this free future would be able to be free to have anything they want as long as they do not exceed their own personal atomic allotment, if you will? Because it's not like people are all going to sit there and say, okay, great. Every time I go to McDonald's, I want 10 Big Macs. And because they don't cost anything, they're just going to give them to me. Yeah. Well, okay. What's the point of that? You can only eat one, maybe two. And now what are you going to do? Throw away the other ones? Whoopee. And I think eventually people will learn to just get over that kind of crap and realize that there's really no point to hoard anything when everything is available. Then it would be like, okay, well, I'm not going to hoard this crap. Let whoever needs to hoard it for until I need it. And then if I need something, I can go and get it or have it delivered to me. And then when that's gone, I can order another one. And that's going to be the beauty of it, is that we're not going to have to worry about having a room or a house filled with closets or storage containers that have stuff that's just filled with junk that we no longer use because we can't bear to give it away because we spent our good hard-earned money on it, and we still have this idea of value, so much so that we're willing to hold on to that stuff and then pay even more money each month just to store it somewhere. Which is just dumb. Dumb. Have you touched that in the last 6 months? No, I haven't even touched it in the last 6 years. Well, then quit paying for the storage container, get the stuff out and sell it, or just let it go to auction. But quit paying for it every month over and over again. That's just dumb. Anyways, I'm going to check out for the night. I want to relax. I look forward to having a nice, relaxing evening. Gonna watch some more of a show on Apple TV. It's called For All Mankind. Where it tells an alternate narrative to the space race that existed during the Cold War era between Russia and the United States, but from a slightly different perspective. In other words, we didn't stop going to the moon. We said, let's keep going. Let's build bases on the moon, and then let's go from there. So if you haven't seen that, it's actually a pretty darn good show so far. I just started the second season last night, and I believe they're already 5 seasons in, and they have another one coming up, which is really cool. I'm pretty happy with the quality of programming that Apple TV or Apple Plus or whatever it's called is making. They make some really good fiction and really good science fiction that nobody else is doing at that level. So anyways, that's it. Sayonara. I am going to check out for the evening and just get ready for bed and enjoy my sleep, because man, I'm sleeping good these days. And I will continue on my experiments with vitamin C, and I'll let you guys know how things go. In the meantime, I'm Michael Loomis reporting to you from ChewDigest.com here on YouTube. Have a good night.